Hi there, this is Bettan from MasterGMAT, and today we are going to look at a critical reasoning question. I'm not going to talk about it much. For those of you who actually want to try it out first, you can do so by pausing the recording, trying it, take your time, and then unpausing it to listen to the explanations. I'll get into all that afterwards. So you may go ahead and pause the recording now. Okay, welcome back. So what are we looking at over here? We're looking at a critical reasoning question. I hope you read it. Now, the first step we have in our critical reasoning workboard at MasterGMAT is obviously not to read all of this, but rather to look firstly at what kind of question you have to deal with, because looking at the question first will actually inform you about what your strategies are and what kind of traps are going to be put before you. So we know through the argument is flawed primarily because the author, etc., that this is an argument flaw question. So already with argument flaw questions, we know that we need to find the flaw in the argument's conclusion or in its underlying assumption. Right? So the first thing we need to do is obviously we need to break down the argument. And if we break down the argument, we notice, well, when we say breaking down the argument, by the way, we're always referring, of course, to breaking it down into proper conclusion, premises, and assumptions if you find any. So basically over here we take a look and we see that the first two sentences are actually data. So this is proof, or what we call premises, and what we get from those premises is this conclusion. How do we know it's a conclusion? Well, in two ways. We have the word therefore, which signals a conclusion, and also should, which is a recommendation word, which also signals conclusion. So we know that that's the conclusion. So this conclusion here, therefore a healthy diet should be completely void of fat, is completely based on the above premises. Okay, so what are we doing now? Once we find that, we've broken it down, we also have to think about our lessons, what we actually learned. Now, how do we find flaws? In argument flaw questions, a lot of times you need to pay attention to the difference in, or the differences in terminology between the premises and the conclusion, or the differences in parameters laid before you. So over here, just take a little notice at, it says should be completely void of fat. So here it says completely void of fat in the general sense of all fats, right? However, over here, what did we talk about? Trans fat. So that's a difference in parameters. That already should tell you something, right? What does it tell us? That we went from a specific finding of a particular kind of fat to a more general discussion or conclusion about fats in general. So obviously we're assuming a few things, including the fact that we can generalize from a specific to general, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's go to A first. Let's see how we can make sense of this. So in A it says, the argument is flawed primarily because the author makes an overgeneralized statement about the various effects of trans fat. Well, we have to be careful over here because the overgeneralized statement is not about trans fat, it's actually about fat in general. The discussion about trans fat is actually premises, so there's no overgeneralization in the premises. The premises, being data, have to be considered as true. They're not questionable. They're actually considered as true. Even if we agree, don't agree, we know they're wrong, not wrong, it doesn't matter. So we can't really question the data. Alright, so that's why it is wrong, but just for the sake of it, let's click on that just to see what happens. Now we have our time awareness tool. It makes you super aware of how long it takes you to answer a question. You actually get quite sharp at this by the end of our training. You know exactly how long it takes you. So click on OK and take a look at how we actually break down the argument very nicely, succinctly, clearly, and it explains exactly what's going on, and it reminds you of what you're supposed to do. Here are our premises, of course, the first two sentences and the conclusion. Okay, and we explain further what is going on and why it's not overgeneralized, right? So Not only do we give you a nice little explanation, we let you try again. We're not going to just spoon feed you the answer just like everyone else. We let you try again for a reason. Okay, based on this information now, A is out. Let's look at B. B extends the properties of an individual entity to apply to other entities in the same group. Well, extend the properties of an individual entity would be the trans fat molecule, right? And we have the properties of that entity, that individual entity, and was it generalized or applied to other entities in the group? Well, most definitely. Therefore, a healthy diet should be completely void of fat. So we went from the specific and applied it to the more general of that class. So we keep this for now. We know that we're doing this, and can we generalize like that? Can we assume that we can take a specific instance and generalize to a whole class? No, we cannot do that, and that is certainly a flaw. But just to make sure, we keep B. Let's go to C. Discusses physiological health matters without referring to exercise. Well, true enough that we have physiological health matters, but do we care about exercise over here? Is it a flaw? Do we need to discuss exercise over here in order to discuss fat and trans fat specifically? Absolutely not. So exercise is completely irrelevant over here. Get rid of that. Does not provide an example of an actual case as basis for the conclusion. Well, actually, firstly, we don't need to provide an example in order to make a logical argument. Secondly, since it's data, well, this is taken as true, so we actually do not need to have anything more, specific that supports the actual conclusion given. So that doesn't make sense. It's not a flaw. And E omits scientific evidence to support the statement about raised LDL levels. Again, we are not omitting anything over here. We don't need scientific evidence in order to make a clear logical argument. So that's not a flaw either. Therefore, we go back to B over here, and this is by far the clearest flaw. Click on that, and indeed, we have a nice little explanation over here telling us exactly what went on. By the way, even if you get it right, check this out. You can always go back and check out the other answer choices and see why exactly they are wrong. Great learning tool over here. Okay, so until next time, hope to see you again. Take care.